All right, everybody, it's that time of year again. Time for our annual look back at our listener, our audience sentiment throughout the year. What did you folks think on the major issues facing the world of options and volatility, and indeed crypto and the market and everything else going on out there? You folks have your finger on the pulse of everything. I've said it many times on the network. You folks are the arbiter of all things at the end of the day. So what did you folks decide last year? Let's find out. I bet you folks thought these polls just vanished into the ether. No, we track them all, listeners. So we can come back at the end of the year just like this to see if you folks had your fingers truly on the pulse of the market last year. Let's kick it off, as we always do every year, with kind of our annual check-in, our annual sentiment poll. Last year, we asked you, hey, if you had to buy a 10% out-of-the-money call expiring on December 31st on one of the following asset classes, which one would you choose? Give you four choices. So volatility, obviously VIX, etc., equities, fixed income, or crypto. And 41.7% of you ended up choosing vol, which is interesting. You ended up having a good year if you did buy that call. If you listened to our VIX year in review show that we just recorded with our pal, the Rock Lobster out there, you would know that we kicked off the year 1404, ended the year 1735. So a straight 1 year out call would have done all right at the end of the day. Now, obviously, you had moments in between where you would have probably wanted to get rid of that call at a much loftier level, but we're talking holding things through the end of the year for the purposes of our poll. So you folks had your fingers on the pulse there. Equities, 33.3%. Obviously, that would have been a good do, as the kids say as well. Pick your major index, the S, the Q's, all up 20+% over the past year. Fixed income, only 8.3% and 16.7% said crypto. In hindsight, that probably would have been the banger of them all, especially if you went Bitcoin. The rally really was protracted in the last quarter, so that really would have helped for a poll like this. You would have done fairly well, but all of them, with the exception probably of fixed income, would have been a good do, as the kids say. We followed it up a week later. Quite simply, will the S close positive on the year? Heck yes, heck no, or who cares? 73.3% of you were on the right trajectory with heck yes, 21.7% saying heck no, and who cares, I'm in crypto, only 5%. That turned out to be a good do as well, but no bad do's really in that one, unless, of course, you were just fading the heck out of the market. All right, we followed that up a week later. We said, hey, it was a flash poll inspired by our conversation on vol views. Someone bought 250,000 of the Feb 17s. They were expiring on Valentine's Day for 67 cents. And we said, quite simply, would you rather buy or sell those calls for, again, 67 cents, listeners? And our audience said you wanted to buy them. 57.7% of you folks said you wanted to buy them. 42.3% said you wanted to sell. Let's go back to Valentine's Day, listeners. Let's see where we topped out. We topped out on Valentine's Day, 14.38. So by my math, listeners, not quite going to get there on Valentine's Day. So our audience not really feeling the flow there. Let's keep rolling. We asked you that same week, another flash poll. The spot Bitcoin ETF was approved that week. Big deal. So we asked you quite simply, will Bitcoin close positive on the year? 56.7% of you said heck yes, 17.9% said heck no, and 25.4% said I don't trade crypto. Obviously, we know what the winner chicken dinner was of that one. Heck yes, all the way, especially as we said, post-election. It's been quite the run for Bitcoin. Looking a little bit farther afield in the next poll for January, listeners, we asked you, what is your preferred way to trade broad market volatility? There's a lot of ways you can do it, obviously. You can go the plain old SPX, SPY options. Remember, at the end of the day, volatility is a component of all options. So if you're trading the S, you are trading broad market volatility. Or you can go the more direct route of the VIX options and futures. Or maybe like your straight vol ETP, so your VXXs, those types of things. Or you want to go funky, you want to go inverse or levered. Maybe you want to go, let's say, an SVIX, something along those lines. And 41.8% of you said you prefer it the old-fashioned way, plain old SPX and SPY options, followed by 32.8%, a lot of you, wanting the inverse or levered ETPs. So you want your UVIXs, your SVIXs, your UVXYs, all that kind of fun. Interesting results. 13.4% for straight VIX options and futures, and 11.9% for the plain old vanilla VXX vol ETPs. Obviously, no right answer to that question, just more of a attempt to get your sense, your pulse of how you like to trade options, listeners. We also had a question in January asking you, hey, it's a new trading year. Which option strategy do you anticipate using the most throughout 2024? Long calls, long puts, or verticals? Covered calls, short puts, or verticals? Straddles, strangles, and flies, or calendars and diagonals? And 39.5% said long calls, long puts, or verticals. Obviously, depends which one of those you use, how your year was. If you're going straight long calls or long verticals, you're doing pretty well. If you're going long puts or put verticals, you could have still done well if you had long stock against it, but you're putting a drag on your portfolio, obviously. Covered calls, short puts, or verticals, 31.6%. So that one, a little bit more challenging. You could have still done well if you set up the right strikes for the covered calls. Short puts obviously worked out pretty well, and short put verticals. And straddles and strangles, obviously, wide gradient in those, and flies, how they worked out. And calendars, 7.9%, or diagonals. Interesting, you folks going the more traditional route. Long calls, long puts, and verticals of both. We also had a fun question. I was running the options panel at Stack this time a year ago with our buddy the Flowmaster and JJ from Tasty, IG Group, and Greg from Amber Data, all kinds of fun. We said there's a lot of topics we want to get in, only an hour. Which topic should we squeeze in? And we gave you a bunch of choices: the zero DTE explosion, the overall options volume explosion, or the crypto options explosion, or other. And 64.7% of you said 0 day all the way, baby. 17.6% number 2 for the crypto options explosion. 14.7% for number 3, the options volume explosion. And bringing up the rare other 2.9%. We had some fun write-ins. If we spent time breaking out all the write-ins we got throughout the year, listeners, this would be a very long show. So we'll spare you the write-ins. Let's go out to the end of January now. Another flash poll, listeners. Inspired once again by our Vol Views conversation. We said there was some surprising action in the UVIX April 12s. Paper bought 16,000 of them for nearly $3, $2.70. That surprised us. We thought we'd put it out to you folks, the ultimate arbiter at the end of the day. Do you like those? Would you buy them or sold to you? And 60% of you said sold to you. Only 40% of you said you liked them. Let's go back to April, listeners, and see how those worked out. Yeah, April 12s, listeners, we kissed it very briefly on tax day, 12 and a quarter roughly. And that was about all she wrote. So I guess if you held them through expiration, you didn't do well, because then it just kept selling off. By the end of April, we were down to $9. So definitely didn't work out. And we certainly didn't get beyond $2.70 of the 12 strike. So kind of hard pressed to see how these calls made any money. So looks like our audience, you were on the right tip there, listener. Sold to you was the right way to go. Those were pretty juicy, which is why we put it out to you folks. End of January, we said VIX has been below 15 since last November. How will it impact your options trading if this volatility regime persists for an extended period? Will you do less credit or income trades? Will you do more debit trades and long premium trades because things are cheaper, obviously? Other or no impact / immune to VIX? Put that in there as kind of a fun lark. And you folks felt like being fun. 35% of you said it's not going to bother me at all. I'm immune to VIX. I like you folks. I want to meet all you immune to VIX people out there. I want you to teach me how you become immune to VIX. But I'm intrigued by that. 30% saying you're going to go more debit or long premium. Thought that would take it because that's an obvious response to a low vol environment. 20% saying you're going to do less credit or income trades. Also equally obvious. And then 15% for funky other. We did a fun flash poll based on our option block debate to kick off February this year. We said who is leading the dance, or really what is leading the dance in the market right now? The Fed, earnings, election volatility, or other. And 50% of you exactly chose the Fed. 40% said earnings vol for Apple and Tesla and others. 10% even then in February talking about election vol, and we were a long way away from the election. Listeners, we all know how that played out. We'll get there in a little bit. All of this data only through the beginning of February already, listeners. Strap in. It's going to be a fun one. Next up, first week of February, we said earnings season going strong. Reports from Microsoft, Apple, Meta, and Amazon, more, I should say, are moving the markets and driving vol, which raises the question, how important is earnings season to your options trading? Somewhat important, very important, a little, I guess, or not at all. and somewhat important took it 46.7%, followed by number 2, 26.7%, choosing very important, 20% saying, a little, I guess, and 6.7% saying not at all. You don't care about earnings. Interesting. Let's go out next week of February. Both Tesla and Apple were trading around 188. Man, 188. Jesus. Both of those look pretty good in hindsight now. There's no wrong answer. Obviously, Tesla looks the better, but my goodness. 188, which raises the question, which would you rather buy right now? Apple, Tesla, I'll stick with crypto, or I'll stick with VIX/vol. 38.5% said Apple. Again, no wrong answer here, really. 29.5% said Tesla. You both did pretty well. Tesla did better, though, obviously. I'll stick with crypto. Also a right answer. That had a banger year. And I'll stick with vol, 20.5%. So that was a technically third. You could have done well. Depends where you got out. But probably at the bottom of our list of performers here. But wow, 188 listeners. Wow, what a year it's been. Options Bootcamp, we had a flash poll. It was heading into NVIDIA earnings late in February. We said, are NVIDIA earnings bigger than the next Fed announcement to you? 70% of you said yes. Only 30% said no. Interesting. Especially early in the year, the Fed was kind of sitting on their hands a little bit. NVIDIA was ruling the roost. I could maybe see how 70% of you would lean that way. There's the old adage, right? It's NVIDIA's market, we're all living in it. Apparently 70% of you agree with that. Around that same time, we asked you, said everyone's laser focused on NVIDIA's earnings this week. How important is this announcement really, in all caps, to the market and to your portfolio? Given the previous results, I'm going to guess the results of these are going to be pretty strong. And we gave you 3 choices. Very, NVIDIA leads the market. As much as other earnings, or not much, is overhyped. And 59.1% of you said very important to you, it leads the market. 22.7% said not much, it's overhyped. 18.2% bringing up the rear, saying as much as other earnings. Going into March, listeners, we said, hey, a discussion on our Options Oddity show. We were talking about the Apple 180 straddle expiring on March 28th, trading at $7.75. You know, Brian is all over his straddles these days. Are you a buyer or a seller at that level? 60% of you wanted to buy it. 40% wanted to sell it. Again, we're going back to March 28th, listeners. The halcyon days of Apple. Apple closed on March 28th, 171.48. So by my basic straddle math, listeners, that looks like that 775 straddle worked out fairly well. Now, obviously, we had some tumult in between there. We got up to nearly 180 and back down. So if you did some gamma scalping, or if you were judicious how you legged out of it, you could have done even better. But just straight buy and hold it to expiration, you still did all right on that trade. So don't tell Brian I said that. But not a bad do there. All right. We also had, after NVIDIA earnings, we said with NVIDIA in the rear view mirror, what is the next big market event that is driving your trading? This was late February, early March. And we said the next Fed meeting, the next earnings season, not much until the election or the next CPI number. And you folks were all over CPI. 61.3% of you said next CPI number. 25.8% said the next Fed meeting. And then a tie for third between earnings season and not much until the election. 6.5%. Man, if you were sitting on your hands between February and the election, wow, that's a long time. But 6.5% of you said that's what you're going to do. All right, let's keep rolling. Another Brian straddle. Brian just infecting us with straddles early in the year. Jumia Technologies, the 1 week $7 straddle at the time was trading for $1. We said, are you a buyer or a seller at that level? This was from the first week of March. 80% of you, we said, by the way, Brian Overby loves all caps this straddle. I think we were being facetious. 80% of you said you wanted to buy it. 20% said you wanted to sell it. Now, this was the first week of March in everyone's favorite Jumia Technologies, and we closed there right around $7, $6.90 at the end of that first week. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say no bueno for that $1. So the 20% of you wanted to sell it were right. And Brian Overby, the heck with you and all your straddle buying, sir. You lost on that one, so take that. We also had a leap day this past year. It was leap year after all, listeners. So we said, in honor of Leap Day, how do you use leaps in your options trading? Gave you 3 choices and the infamous other: stock substitution, income trading, so cover calls, short puts, long-term hedges, or other. 62.5% of you said stock substitution. right around 12% each for all the rest, actually. So kind of a tie for second place between income, long-term hedging, and other. So stock sub, that makes sense. That's kind of the most straightforward use case. The long-term hedge, some people like that too. Income, not as much, obviously, for many reasons we talked about on the network in the past. So there you go, a little leap day fun as well. Getting into early April, we asked you folks, how are you approaching the S in your portfolio right now? We said straight long, you're riding it up, ride or die. You're long but with a hedge. You're long call or stock sub, so you're not long the underlying, but you're still playing. Or you're out sitting in cash, and that ended up winning it. 36.7% of you said you were sitting in cash back as of April 1st. Interesting. Followed by 31.7% saying you're longing, you're probably longing for the market, but you're long and hedging with the put. 25% saying you're going straight long, ride or die, baby, and 6.7% say you're long a call or a stock substitution. Interesting. Over a third of you sitting out as of April 1st. Can't blame you. It was a good run already, but it's been a wild year out there, listeners. This goes back to our heated debate from earlier this year. Are options a zero-sum game? This became this ongoing saga on boot camp. We put it out to you folks, and it was surprisingly contentious. At the end of the day, 57.4% of you chose the right answer, which is no. 42.6% say yes. For those 42.6%, I say check out our shows on this subject from earlier this year. So weirdly contentious, this one. People got very hot and bothered by that, but I'm glad to see more than half of you chose the right answer, which is no. Oh, we also had a flash poll on the same subject. Our stocks is zero-sum game. This only lasted an hour. This one, 66.7, so exactly 2/3 said yes, but this was only a 1-hour flash poll. So I dismissed those results because I think Dan was gumming up the works. Dan was mentioned in it. You know, Dan, always up to some skullduggery down there in Frankfurt. I think he gummed up the works, so he put yes. So we'll just sweep that one under the rug, listeners, shall we, as we keep on rolling. Right around tax day, we asked you, debating this question live now on the Advisors Option with Option Rats, our buddy Mr. Matt, a little bearish, I think it's fair to say, earlier this year. He was talking about his infamous 3,500 before 5,500 level in the S, so he thought we'd put that to you. Which level do you think we'll hit first? 3,500 or 5,500? In hindsight, we all know which one was the right answer. And 71.4% of you agreed with that. You said 5,500 first. Only 28.6% agreed with Matt on the dark side, saying 3,500. Man, that would have been an interesting year if that was the case. Hey, still come to pass this year. You never know. Wild times could be in store for us. Mid-April, again, tax day, we asked you. The market's been in rally ho mode for quite some time. In your opinion, what is the biggest driver of this rally? We said the Fed, the AI revolution, or other. 48.8% of you said the AI revolution. 39.5% going the Fed. 11.6% for other. A hot topic around OIC time, which was April of this year, was the NYSE put out a poll. You remember, listeners, asking whether they should go 24/7 on their stock trading, or at least 24/5. So we thought we'd ask you folks, do you think stocks should trade 24 hours a day? An overwhelming nearly 70% of you, 69.8% of you said no. Only 30.2% said yes. That's why I love you folks. Sometimes you go deep on these issues. We got a lot of hardcores who like to think about these issues. You think retail would just say, oh, bam, we want all 24/7 all the time. But we have a lot of pros in our audience, a lot of institutional traders, industry folks, as well as a lot of very serious retail who like to think about this stuff. And sometimes more isn't always better, listeners, and you folks, 70% of you coming down to agree with that. We said part 2 of our poll, because it was such a contentious issue, we said if U.S. options trading hours are extended, what would that look like? You want to go 24/5 across the board, some sort of limited pilot program, or something else entirely. And you folks, you said if it does happen, you want full 24-hour trading. That won it with 57.1%. 33.3%, so a third of you saying you want a pilot and high volume names only. 4.8% saying earnings season only, and the other coming in also around 4.8%. So interesting, I guess your folks figure if it does happen, might as well bite the bullet and just get it done. But more of you don't want it to happen to begin with. We said, oh, this is back on the Apple buyback time, early May. Tim Cook's buying a ton of Apple stock while Warren Buffett is selling it. Which side of that trade do you prefer? You want to be Tim Cook and buy some Apple, or Warren Buffett and sell the Apple? 2/3 of you said you wanted to sell some Apple, you wanted to be on the Warren Buffett side of the fence. And this was from early May, listeners. We all know how that worked out. On the day we did this poll, Apple closed at 181.71, closed today 243.36. Obviously got higher during the year to 260. So we all know which side of the trade was the right one, but I don't fault any of you who thought Apple was already too lofty at that level. We said we're going into the OIC conference. This was late April. We said we're setting up the Southern studio to chat with the movers and shakers in the options market. Time for you folks to weigh in. What should we talk about? The impact of the impact of 0-day options trading, 24-hour option and stock trading, the volume surge, can it continue, or other. And 45.8% of you said you wanted to talk about the 24-hour stock and options trading beating even number 2, 0-day. I thought 0-day was going to run away with it. We didn't include Bitcoin options in there. You probably should have, because a lot of you wanted us to talk about that. That was a popular write-in for that poll, as I recall. And the volume surge, 8.3%. You know how that all played out. Listen to our recordings from OIC if you are intrigued, listeners. We had a flash poll during Vol Views in mid-May as well with our buddy Dr. Vix. We're talking about the July 11 puts trading for a nickel. This was on May 17th. We said, are you a buyer or a seller at that level, listeners? 58.3% of you said you wanted to buy, listeners, for a nickel. And 41.7% said you wanted to sell. I'm looking at July expiration in VIX. And we got to right around 15 handle. Got up to 18 actually on the 24th. That's after expiration. 16.5 on the 19th. So we're in that 15 to 16 range out there. Obviously that's the cash. I'm not looking at the futures, but a far away from the 11 handle. So unfortunately, all of you 58.3% who wanted to buy that threw away a nickel, but hey, live to fight another day at the end of the day. We also asked you in the first week of May, do you think we'll have listed 0-day options in Tesla, Nvidia, and Apple before the end of the year? We had an exact tie, 37% each for yes and no, and 25.9% saying you don't trade 0-day. Interesting results. Again, shows how split our audience is. Obviously, we know the answer. We did not get those this year. Doesn't seem like we're going to get them anytime soon, unfortunately, listeners. So maybe we should do this poll again. And I think maybe the end of this year, 2025, maybe even be optimistic at this point. But it might be a good time to run this poll again, listeners, and just get your sentiment on all that fun. All right, let's keep on rolling, listeners. We also asked you again, popular topic, NVIDIA's earnings coming up again. The At the Money straddle is trading for $78 heading into the announcement, $10 more. And the stock has moved on average after previous announcements. Too expensive, too cheap, Goldilocks just right, or I'm not touching NVIDIA with a 10-foot pole. And that is the way exactly half, 50% of you went. Don't want to touch it. 31% said it's a little too pricey for you. Turned out to actually be a little cheap, listeners. And 9.5% each for cheap and just right. Now, that was the one that NVIDIA really knocked the cover off the ball. We said, does that blockbuster earnings signal a top for this market, or is this just a break before the next leg up? Heck yes, this is crazy, or heck no, buy more, baby. And 65.6% of you said you wanted to buy more. That turned out to be the right answer, 34.4% saying, heck yes, this is too crazy, I'm out. A flash poll as well. We asked you about JetBlue. Someone was buying 1 week, 5.5 calls. This is the end of May, listeners, for 20 cents. It traded 10,000 times. We asked, are you folks a buyer or a seller? You folks have liked participating in our little flash polls around individual funky activity out here. So we'll continue that for this year, listeners. So 10,000 of them for 20 cents. JetBlue, this was the end of May. So this is the first week of June. And JetBlue went out on the 7th at $5.50. So right at the money, it looks like. So these pretty much looks like they scratched or lost 20 cents. Depends on how they got out of them, obviously. So not a screaming do, as the kids would say out here. So looks like the 54.5% of you, it's kind of a wash on this one. I wouldn't really call it a winner or a loser. Maybe you got a chance to scratch them. Didn't really make any money on them, though. And you sold them, maybe you scratched them that way either. Maybe you made 20 cents. Not a huge banger. All right, June 3rd now, getting into summertime. We said, hey, both Palantir and Robinhood are trading around $21. Another one, my goodness. 4x that now, close to it for Palantir. I'll have to go see where Robinhood is. Which would you rather buy right now? Robinhood, Palantir, I'm out on both, or I'd rather trade Vol. 47.8% of you went the right way for Palantir, even though Hood did pretty good as well. 30.4% for number 2 for Hood. 15.2% of you said you'd rather trade Vol. 6.5% said you're out on both. And our audience, pretty prescient throughout the year. June 10th, going into another Fed announcement. We said, should the Fed cut rates this week? Yes or no? Again, that's why I like our audience, you folks. Go deep on these issues. 69.6% of you said no. I like it. Bucking the market trend, bucking the market conventional wisdom. Oh, we have to do a quarter point. You folks said no to that. 30.4% saying yes. All right, and then we have June 17th. We said a lot of debate about GameStop lately. This is back during, I guess, Roaring Kitty Phase 2, call it what you will. Some believe there is shady business afoot, and the stock is clearly, easy for me to say. Some believe there is shady business afoot, and the stock is clearly being manipulated for nefarious purposes. Others say this is just blatant overreach by the regulators. Where do you fall? Shady business is afoot, regulators want headlines, or who cares? And 62.3% of you said shady business is clearly afoot. 24.6% of you didn't care. 13.1% of you say the regulators just want headlines. Hard to argue with the shady business on that. There was a lot of skullduggery going on in GameStop around that time. You folks, as usual, have your fingers on the pulse. Another flash poll coming off of the option block this time. Massive block, 63,000 of the July 65 calls traded for 4 cents. This was in late June, so they had about a month. We said, where do you fall on this, quote, vol trading strategy? Junk VIX calls can pop, you like them, or a complete waste of capital, or you don't care, just a hedge, or you prefer it as a back spread, so selling something lower and then buying these calls against it. And 59.3% of you going the Matt Amberson route, saying junk VIX calls, they can pop. 22.2% saying it was a complete waste of capital. 14.8% of you didn't care, and 3.7% of you prefer it as a back spread. I'm just looking to see how high did we get during the month of July. We were just talking about July, listeners, right around expiration. Obviously, we didn't get to 65, and obviously this was too soon for the big. If they had these calls on in August, different story, but they didn't. They had them on in July, and we topped out in July around, looks like 18 and a half. Obviously, you can get a little move. You can do all right on these calls. Matt's discussed this at length on the network in the past, but 18 and a half ain't going to do it. So looks like, unfortunately, a waste of 4 cents, 63,000 times. All right, late June, we said it's the start of summer. The weather is hot and realized vol is low. Which option strategies do you anticipate using the most during this traditionally quiet period until Labor Day? Long calls, puts or verticals, short calls, short puts and verticals, calendars or diagonals or other, and almost 55% of you said short calls, puts and verticals. You wanted to blast the hell out of vol during the summer months. This was June, so if you held it through August, we know how that worked out, unfortunately. 45.5% said calendars or diagonals. Depending on how you set those up, they could have been all right, or they could have been a disaster. And no real size votes for long calls or puts or other, really. Interesting. You folks are very fixated on short calls, puts and verticals, and calendars for this summer. Again, kind of fascinating. This is another kind of fun question of the week. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go out to around the July 4th holiday. We said it's a holiday week. Let's have some fun. NVIDIA trading around 124 with an expiration date at the end of the year. So December 31st. Would you rather, one of our infamous would you rathers, listeners, buy an at the money put or buy an at the money call, or just enjoy a fun holiday? Say the hell with NVIDIA, listeners. 46.6% of you say you want to buy an at the money call. 27.6% say at the money puts. Obviously, bullish or bearish there. 25.9% said just want to enjoy a fun holiday. And you know what? Interestingly enough, the call won. I have to go pull the prices out, though. You may not have made money because NVIDIA went out at 134 on expiration. So 124. It's only a 10-handle rally. Got up to this year at 152, obviously given that up since then. So if you held it till the end of the year, we just said what the straddle was, right? Going into earnings, a straddle was a banger, I think, to put it mildly. I mean, heading into earnings, the straddle was $78. So a call throughout the rest of the year, $10. Yeah, easy. All right. After the July 4th holiday, we said, hey, it's earnings season once again. Our long-term average for earnings vol has skyrocketed to a record 113 after last season. Are we on track for another explosive season? Will this cycle beat the record? And if you're confused, check our site for more info. And overwhelmingly, nearly 77% of you said yes, it's going to beat 113%. Only 23% of you said no. We all know what the right answer was. This long-term average has continued to be, and earnings vol in general has continued to be a banger throughout the second half of this year. Going into August now, we said, hey, another flash poll around vol views. Paper trading 64,000 of the OCC20s and VIX for $1.76. This is right after the big meltdown, a couple of weeks after that, August 19th. And we said last week, paper traded over 100,000 OCC18 puts for prices around $2.15. Got to buy one, listeners. OCC20s for $1.76. You got to buy them and hold them to October expiration, or the OCC18 puts for $2.15. And 60.7% of you said you wanted to go with the calls for $1.76. Only 39.3% of you going the put route. Let's get out to OCC expiration. We closed right around the 18 handle, listeners, so that's a rough one. Looks like they're both losers pretty much at those prices, listeners. Obviously weren't north of the 20 handle, weren't south of the 18 handle, so inside that 18 to 20 range is pretty much where both those trades lose, and that's pretty much where we settled out for the most part. Plus or minus a few points there. I'll have to go look and see, but the exact price on expiration for October, but VIX cash going out in those levels, on those date range, I should say, around the 18 handle. So not looking good for either of those. So unfortunately, it's like a double loser for both of those. All right, getting on to September, listeners. We asked you folks, Fed's coming up again. If the Fed cuts a quarter point, what happens to the markets? And we said, finally, a strong rally, or not enough, big sell-off, or other, or meh, not much. And 41.7% of you ended up going that route, saying, not much. 31.3% saying not enough, a big sell-off. 22.9% of you said a strong rally, and only 4.2% of you said other out there, listeners. And we all know what happened from that. We posted that on September 9th, and SPX pretty much shot up over the coming week, listeners. We got up to 5,600 north of it, so the market liked what they heard out of the Fed that week. And we had a fun flash poll from our 80s trivia contest on Option Block Next. We asked you, hey, what's your favorite, or I should say, who is your favorite Heather from the 80s? Gave you two choices, Heather Locklear, Heather Thomas, or that other Heather. 77.8% of you go what I think is the wrong way, Heather Locklear. I'm more of a Heather Thomas guy, but to each their own. Everyone has their own Heather. Only 22.2% going for the Fall Guy lady and other, I think TJ Hooker, Heather Thomas, of course. September 16th, we said, hey, Bitcoin has lived many lives over the past decade, but what role does Bitcoin really play in a portfolio? It's digital gold. It's an uncorrelated asset class. It's just another tech stock or other, and exactly pretty much a third each choosing uncorrelated asset class and just another tech stock. So pretty much a tie for those two for the number one spot. 25.6% saying digital gold. You know my thoughts on that, listeners. 7.7% going other. September 23rd, SEC finally approves Bitcoin options trading. We said, do you plan to trade IBIT options when they are listed? We know the volume number is what the answer was, but what did you folks have to say? 63.2% of you said heck yes, 31.6% saying hell no, and 5.3% of you say you prefer BitO or BitX or one of those other wild products. All right, then we kept rolling into October, listeners. Paper buying the OCC2729 VIX call spread for 12 cents 157,000 times. That price, are you a buyer or a seller? And 58.3% of you said you want to sell that thing for all of that juicy 12 cents. We were just talking about VIX in the October cycle, right around the 18 handle. So certainly 27, 29. We topped out at the end of that month on Halloween, 23.16 in the cash. So either way, not really sniffing a 27, let alone a 29 handle. So that 12-cent sale, kind of silly, but you folks pocketed it at the end of the day. So congratulations to you. Also at the end of September, we asked you folks, election is looming. What is your trading plan through November 4th? Go long, stay the course, get flat, go to cash, get short, hedge your portfolio, or trade small, trade intraday only until the election. And 39.3% of you said stay long, stay the course, which turned out to be a good do, as the kids say. 32.1% of you, pretty close, number 2, saying trade small, trade intraday only until the event. 21.4% of you said you wanted to get flat or go to cash. 7.1% of you said you wanted to get short or hedge your portfolio. All right. Coming up later in October, we asked, hey, you may have heard an election is looming. If you had to buy one straddle to hold through the election, which one would you choose? Gave you the DJT Nove 31 straddle expiring on the 8th of November for $17.80. The SPY 582 straddle also expiring on November 8th for $17. That was a juicy one. The VIX expiring on the 13th, 19 straddle for $4.16 or other. And SPY ended up taking it 582 straddle for $17. We all know SPY went on a rampage after the election, listeners. So this expired on November 8th. Let's see, where do we top out on November 8th? 598.19. So interesting. You actually lost a little money on that straddle, listeners. Break even $5.99. You got to $598.19. Wow. You had to wait till early December before you break through the 600 level. I thought that seemed a little rich, and obviously you could do intraday scalping and other things, but the vol collapse on top of that made that a dangerous do in my eye. Wow. Yeah. The VIX straddle. Let's look really quickly, listeners. This was VIX expiring on the 13th, listeners. VIX went out on the 13th. $14 in the cash. Vol collapse. So you ended up doing all right. I'll have to go check the futures to be precise, but you ended up doing all right on that straddle. DJT, another one, was kind of on a wild ride after that had moved that much almost before the election even happened. That one had a wild ride over the course of the post-election period. It topped out. This is November 8th, listeners. DJT topped out at $31.91. It had a huge move leading into the election. October 29th got up to $51.50. And then through the election, it actually kind of sat there. So you got taken to the woodshed on that straddle, listener. So that was definitely the worst of the three. SPY, you at least came close to breaking even. You probably made a little money on VIX, but DJT, ooh, no bueno. The stock was almost exactly at your straddle that you paid nearly $18 for. That's no bueno, listeners. All right. Nove 30s in V stocks. This is October 25th. Someone paid 45 cents for those bad boys. That price, are you a buyer or a seller? 62.5% of you said you are a seller. 37.5% said you are a buyer. Nove 30s didn't quite get there, listeners. Let's look exactly over the course of the past year. Yeah, right around Nove expiration. We topped out in November at 20.06. So never really threatened the 30s. So looks like the nearly 2/3 of you who wanted to sell that were on the right tip. Around the election flash poll, we said, hey, actually election day, are you feeling bullish or bearish in Bitcoin ahead of tomorrow's election? So this was actually one day before the election. We asked that because someone traded 100,000 of the DEES 1575, 1315 put spreads in BITO. They paid 63 cents for that bad boy. We said, at that price, are you a buyer? Are you a seller? Or wake me when it's over? And it turned out 40.7% of you said you wanted to be woken up when it was over. 33% of you said you wanted to buy that put spread, so you were bearish on Bitcoin. Obviously not the right route. 25.9% said sell it, which turned out to be the right do, as the kids say. Heading into the end of October, we said we have one more full trading week before the election. Anything can still happen. Surprises can still unfold, which raises the question, where will VIX close on the Friday after the election? We said right around here, 18 to 21. Lower below 18. higher, 21 to 24, or still higher, north of 24. And you folks chose 18 to 21 on the week of the election. So let's go check for ourselves. Listeners, talking about VIX cash, obviously. And it closed at 14.94 on that Friday. So the right answer was actually lower, below 18, which 15.1% of you ended up choosing. Again, didn't seem like a hard one, that one. Seemed like vol coming in was kind of the savvy play, and that turned out to be the case. All right, we had just launched a futures rundown not that long before this. Listeners, we asked you around Halloween, inspired by our futures rundown spooktacular, which elements of futures trading are the most intimidating to you? Is it the confusing margin, accidental delivery, weird and wild products, or other? Something else spooks you. And about 46% of you, so tie again, choosing the confusing margin and accidental delivery. Only 7.7% of you going for something else spooks you. Weirdly enough, the weird and wild products not featuring in at all in our voting. It's kind of interesting. There's some weird products in the futures world, listeners, but apparently they don't scare you. You ain't afraid of nothing. All right. We also asked you which option strategy scares you the most, and naked short puts took it with 37.5%, followed by naked short calls, 31.3%. 18.8% of you chose naked short straddles, which is the right answer, and 12.5% for other. All right, on the day before the election, we had another flash poll around vol views. We said, hey, 100,000 of the VIX NOV 17 puts expiring on the 20th traded for 85 cents heading into the election. It seemed juicy, but we're looking for a vol collapse. We asked you, are you a buyer or a seller at that price? And 2/3 of you, pretty much exactly 66%, saying you are buyers, 33% saying sellers. On the 20th, weirdly enough, we caught a little bit of a lift in vol. Vol got crushed on the 13th down to 14. And then we actually got a little bit of a lift back into the 20th, actually, before vol fell apart again into early December at down to a 13 handle. So that little bit of a lift heading into that expiration for those puts actually would have cost you. And hopefully you had been savvy enough to get out of them. I had a lot of downside puts. A lot of people did. And we got out of them a few days after the election. If you waited, unfortunately, until expiration on these, then you were a sad camper. So this is kind of a toss-up. If you were diligent, got out of them early, you did well on this trade. If you waited, you took a little bit of a bath on these bad boys. We also asked you on the election night, you folks were fairly prescient. We said, hey, $1 million question, who will win? Not the question is, or the question is not, I should say, who do you want to win? It is who do you think will actually win? And 74.3% of you, this came out before really the results even started hitting. 74.3% of you said Trump. That's stunning to me. 21.8% said Harris, and none of the above, 4%. That's my vote, listeners. Man, a lot of you voted too, and it was only a short poll. You folks were feeling it. You're feeling the Trump. Interesting. All right, November 11th, we said vol went to die the last time Trump took office. It hit single digits and stayed there for a large part of the year. Do you think we'll see a repeat of that in 2025? Quite simply, will VIX close in single digits at least once next year? And this is almost exactly a toss-up. No ended up taking it with 50.8%. 49.2% of you said yes. This was a lot of people chiming in on this one as well, and you could not make up your minds. That shows you how evenly split we are on this issue. Interesting. What do you think, listeners? Think we're going to hit the single digits and close there at least once? I hope not, just for many reasons, but I'm always fading a little vol every now and then, and I'm good for a little vol fade, but that's single digits. Last time that happened, bad things happened in the world of options as a result. We don't want a repeat of that. All right, let's keep rolling. Mid-November, rumors were swirling about Buffett's growing pile of cash. Quite simply, what the heck is he up to? Why is he hoarding $325 billion in cash and growing? We said, waiting for a market pullback. Is he saving for an acquisition? Is he going to have a big dividend or other? And 76% of you said he's waiting for a pullback. Interesting. Hasn't gotten it yet then. 12% of you saying saving for an acquisition, and he's out of ideas, also about 12%. ETH versus Solana, the hot debate in the crypto world. We asked you which digital asset has more upside in the coming year. And kind of like our VIX single digits poll, you folks were kind of evenly split on this one too. Both around 50% each for ETH and Solana. So no clear winner in that one either. If you look at the performance for this year, Solana is the winner, but obviously there's more room to run over the coming years, what the question was asking. Another flash poll, end of November. Jan 75 calls or lighting up the tape in crude oil at 65 cents. WTI was trading around 70 bucks. Are you a buyer or seller of those calls? 2/3 of you wanted to sell them. 33.3% say you wanted to buy them. 75, we haven't quite gotten there, but we have gotten north of the 70 handle. We have until Jan expiration, so the jury is still out on this trade, but 2/3 of you wanted to sell it. We said if you're looking to hedge SPX through the end of the year, how are you doing it? You using VIX calls or you using SPX puts, the more direct route or the indirect route? 62.5%, so almost 2/3 of you saying you want to go the direct route of SPX puts or put spreads. This was a flash poll, I believe, during vol views. Only 37.5% say you're going the VIX call route. I can certainly get behind that. Another fun flash poll during the option block. Is Highlander 2 the worst sequel of all time? Yes, no, or submit your other is way worse. We had a lot of write-ins for which film you thought was the worst of all time. There were some fun ones in there. Maybe I go dig them up. We'll have a separate recording about that. But the actual poll was pretty close to even, 50% each for yes and no. And the folks who say no obviously have not seen Highlander 2. It is a terrible thing. All right. November 25th, coming into the end of the year, we said the market seems to be having a hard time maintaining the 6,000 level in the SPX, which raises the question, will SPX close above 6,000 at the end of the year? Heck yes, hell no, who cares, I'm in crypto, or who cares, I'm in cash. 60.9% of you ended up choosing heck yes. 23.9% said hell no, and 8.7% said you're all in on crypto, and 6.5% said you're in on cash. We all know the answer. S&P closed 58.81 for the year, so no joy for the nearly 61% of you that wanted to buy upside in the S. Thanksgiving flash poll, we asked you, hey, which new options products, let me put new in air quotes, some of these are a little older than others, but they're all relatively new. We said, which new options products are you most thankful for this year? 0-day options, spot Bitcoin ETF options, the binary/event options, or other. And 55.6% of you going the predictable route of the 0-day options. A third of you saying spot Bitcoin ETF options, and 11.1% said other. No joy for the binaries or the events, even though a lot of you were slinging them, I know, going into the election. All right, early December, coming into the tail end of the year. South Korea upending the market, saying they're going to declare martial law. We said, hey, is this a tempest in the teapot or a symptom of more surprise volatility to come? Quite simply, VIX was at 13.5. Do you think VIX will close higher or lower at the end of the year? 51.2%, so slightly more than half, chose the right answer, above 13.5. Lower, below 13.5, 41.5%. Who cares, I'm in crypto, 4.9%. And who cares, I'm in cash, 2.4%. Obviously, slightly more than half of you going the right way, listeners. All right, and coming into the end of the year, we asked you folks, hey, crypto assets have exploded in value this year. Many people are excited about the potential for crypto under the new administration. Quite simply, which crypto asset do you feel has the most potential upside in 2025? Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, or other, and Bitcoin taking it with 52%, 16% each roughly for all the rest. So kind of a tie for second in our poll. So you folks, at least for right now, all Bitcoin all the time, listeners. Again, hard to argue. The recent performance has been pretty good. We also asked you coming into the end of the year, many options traders have been caught up in the IBIT frenzy. Are you one of them? Quite simply, have you been lured to the dark side of crypto options through IBIT? Yes, I'm on the dark side. Not yet, but I'm crypto curious, or crypto isn't for me. That last one ended up taking it less than half, 44.1%. 29.4% saying, yes, I am on the dark side, and not yet, but I'm crypto curious at 26.5%. So obviously, more than half, if you add them all up, are in it or kind of curious about getting in it. And seeing the volume numbers, you folks are clearly curious about a little thing called IBIT, listeners. We also had a fun flash poll after one of our oddities recently saying, hey, there's a battle brewing in the March 5 calls in EMKR. Paper has bid them all the way up to 20 cents. Has the drone battle spilled over into the options market? Quite simply, are you a buyer of these calls at 20 cents? And we had, I'll pay 20 cents, or sold to you, or maybe for a nickel. And almost exactly a tie, about 42% each for sold to you, or maybe I'll pay a nickel, but that's it. And no one, only 14.3% of you we're willing to pay 20 cents for those bad boys. And obviously, those are March. You still got some time. Looks like those calls were no bueno, listener. They just reported earnings, looks like, and no bueno, listeners. The stock's not looking great. It's at about $3 right now. So that's the challenging one. I think at this point, even a nickel might be a little rich for those calls. But c'est la vie, that's what makes them fun, listeners. And we also asked you one last question for the year. We said, hey, looking ahead to 2025, how are you positioning the equity portion of your portfolio? We said no change, markets only go up, or you're scaling back going to cash, or you're staying long but with an aggressive hedge, or you're pivoting to crypto or gold or something else. 45.2% of you still feeling the bull, saying no change, markets go up, the Uncle Mike camp. 28.6% of you say you're scaling back or going to cash. 21.4% say you're long but with an aggressive hedge, and 4.8% of you are scaling back or pivoting, you're pivoting to crypto or gold or a similar product. And our actual final question of the week for the year, listeners, which is still live right now, so it gets a couple of days into the new year as well, but we're going to include it in our poll because it is the final question of the week for 2024. Quite simply, which asset class do you feel has the most upside potential next year, or really this year now, 2025? Equities, fixed income, crypto, or vol? As always, you can write in with others. People have written in with some silly others, but vol taking it right now, 49.3%, 22.7% for crypto, 20% for equities, and only 8% for fixed income. So first off, no love for equities after they were dominating our tape all year long from our polls, certainly from our audience perspective. A lot of love for vol. Kind of interesting. This has about a day left to go. I expect the final poll results about a day from now to come in somewhere close to this. So wow, vol, are you feeling vol, listeners? Nearly half of you are for this coming year. Should be an interesting year. I hope you had a great year playing along with all of our questions of the week. We love all the engagement, all the feedback, all the responses, fun, silly, all kinds of things you folks send in. We love you all. Keep playing along. At Options is the place to go to play along with all of our questions of the week. Hope you have a great trading year, and we'll see you back here next week for another great question of the week. Stay safe out there, everybody.